Emily Carter woke up on her birthday with a feeling she could not fully explain, a quiet tension sitting in her chest as sunlight slipped through the curtains of her suburban home in Oregon, and while the house was calm and familiar, her heart felt restless, aware that another year had passed without much changing in her marriage, because Daniel, her husband of 9 years, was a good man in many ways, steady, responsible, and kind, but lately their life together felt more like a routine than a romance, filled with polite conversations and shared schedules instead of deep talks and warmth. And as Emily lay in bed listening to the distant sound of Daniel making coffee, she remembered how birthdays used to feel when she was younger, full of excitement and surprise, but now they felt heavier, like quiet checkpoints reminding her of dreams she had set aside. And when Daniel finally came into the bedroom, he kissed her forehead gently and smiled in a way that was loving but distracted, telling her happy birthday and promising her a surprise later that evening, which made Emily smile back even though she did not know why her heart hesitated, because Daniel was not the kind of man who planned dramatic surprises, and his voice carried a nervous energy she had not heard before. Then the day passed slowly as Emily went through her routine, answering birthday messages from friends and family, baking a simple cake, and choosing a soft blue dress for the evening, the same dress Daniel once told her made her eyes look brighter, and as she dressed she wondered if he would notice, or if he was already drifting somewhere far from her emotionally. And when evening finally came and the doorbell rang, Emily felt an unexpected rush of nerves, because something about the timing, the silence before the knock, and Daniel's posture made her feel like this was not an ordinary moment. And when Daniel opened the door, he stepped aside to reveal a man Emily had never seen before. Tall, neatly dressed, with calm eyes that carried a quiet kindness, and Daniel introduced him as Lucas, an old college friend, explaining with an awkward smile that he had invited him over as part of the birthday surprise. And in that instant Emily felt confused, because she had expected flowers or jewelry, not a stranger standing in her doorway holding a small bouquet of white lilies. But Lucas smiled politely and wished her a happy birthday in a warm, respectful tone, and there was something sincere in the way he spoke that caught her attention, making her feel seen in a way she had not felt in a long time. And as she welcomed him inside, the atmosphere in the house suddenly changed, like fresh air entering a closed room. And during dinner Lucas shared light stories from the past, moments from college days that showed a different side of Daniel, a younger, more hopeful version who talked about ambitions and dreams. And Emily listened closely, realizing she had never heard many of these stories before, and with each laugh and shared moment, she felt both closer to Daniel's past and strangely aware of the distance in their present. And although nothing improper or dramatic happened, Emily sensed that Daniel's decision to bring Lucas into their home on such a personal day was not random, because Daniel watched her carefully, as if waiting for a reaction. And Emily began to understand that this birthday gift was not meant to impress her but to reveal something. And as the evening continued, she noticed how Lucas listened attentively when she spoke, how he asked thoughtful questions without crossing any boundaries, and how his presence highlighted something missing in her own marriage, not love, but connection. And by the time Emily realized this, she knew this birthday would not be remembered for cake or candles, but for the quiet emotional shift that had begun the moment the door opened, a shift that hinted at deeper truths waiting to surface, truths that neither she nor Daniel could ignore anymore. A dinner moved quickly, filled with steady conversation that felt lighter than Emily expected, and as plates were passed and glasses refilled, Lucas spoke with an easy calm, sharing moments from his life after college, his move to Seattle, his work, and the long gaps that had slowly separated him from Daniel over the years, while Daniel listened more than he spoke, nodding often, smiling faintly, almost relieved that someone else was carrying the energy of the room. And Emily noticed this shift right away, because it reminded her of how often she had filled the silence in her marriage, asking questions, making plans, and keeping conversations alive. And as Lucas talked, he included Emily naturally, asking her about her work, her interests, and what she enjoyed outside of daily responsibilities, questions that felt simple but meaningful. And Emily found herself answering honestly, surprised by how easy it felt to speak. And when Daniel briefly stepped away to take a phone call, the house grew quiet, but the silence felt calm rather than uncomfortable. And Lucas looked around the room before gently telling Emily that birthdays often reveal things people try to hide, a comment that caught her off guard. And when she asked what he meant, Lucas explained that he believed special days showed the real shape of a person's life, both the good and the missing parts. And Emily laughed softly, admitting she had felt that way all day without knowing how to say it. And Lucas listened closely, not interrupting, not offering advice, just giving her space, and in that moment Emily felt a warmth she had not felt in years, not romantic desire, but emotional recognition, the feeling of being truly heard. And when Daniel returned, the energy shifted again, his eyes moving between Emily and Lucas as if he sensed something had changed, though nothing improper had occurred. And as the evening continued, Emily noticed Daniel growing quieter, his hands folded, his posture thoughtful, while Lucas remained respectful, never crossing boundaries, yet somehow revealing more about Emily's emotional world than Daniel had in years. And Emily began to question why Daniel had invited Lucas at all, wondering if he hoped this connection would fill a space he no longer knew how to reach. And the thought made her chest tighten, because she did not want replacement or escape, only understanding. And as dessert was served and candles lit, Emily made a silent wish not for excitement or escape, but for honesty. And as the candle flames flickered, she felt certain that this evening was building towards something important, because Daniel's quiet distance, Lucas's thoughtful presence, and her own growing awareness were forming a fragile balance, one that could not last without truth. And as the night deepened, Emily sensed that this birthday was no longer just a celebration, but a turning point, where unspoken feelings were moving closer to the surface, waiting for the moment they would finally be named as the plates were cleared. And the house settled into a late-night quiet. Daniel finally spoke with a voice that sounded heavier than Emily had ever heard, admitting that inviting Lucas had not been an easy choice but one made after many nights of guilt and thought, because he had felt Emily drifting away emotionally and did not know how to reach her anymore. And as he spoke, his words came faster, like a door finally opening, explaining that he loved her deeply but felt he had failed to give her the emotional attention she deserved, choosing comfort over effort and silence over difficult conversations. And Emily listened without interrupting, her heart pounding, because hearing the truth hurt but also felt strangely relieving. And when Daniel confessed that he hoped Lucas's presence might remind them both of the people they once were, Emily realized this night was never meant to test her loyalty but to force honesty into a marriage that had grown too quiet. And Lucas stood slowly, clearly uncomfortable being part of something so personal, saying gently that his intention was never to interfere, only to reconnect with an old friend and respect the bond Daniel and Emily shared. But Emily stopped him with a calm voice, asking him to stay just a little longer, because for the first time in years she felt the truth was finally being spoken out loud. And turning to Daniel, she admitted that she had felt lonely even while married, not because of lack of love but because of lack of emotional closeness, explaining how she missed being asked about her thoughts, her fears, and her dreams. And Daniel nodded, tears forming, accepting responsibility instead of defending himself. And in that moment the room felt heavy but honest, filled with the weight of everything they had avoided for too long. And Lucas spoke quietly then, not as a friend choosing sides but as someone who had lived long enough to understand regret, saying that love did not disappear suddenly but faded slowly when people stopped listening. And his words landed gently, not accusing, just true. And Emily realized that Lucas was not the center of this moment but a reflection of what had been missing between her and Daniel. And as the conversation continued, Emily reached for Daniel's hand, not out of habit but choice, telling him she did not want perfection, only presence. And Daniel squeezed her hand tightly, promising not dramatic change but consistent effort. And the silence that followed felt different, not empty but full of meaning. And when Lucas finally prepared to leave, thanking them for trusting him with such a vulnerable evening, Emily felt gratitude rather than confusion, because his presence had helped uncover truths she had buried even from herself. And as the door closed behind him, Emily and Daniel sat together on the couch, aware that nothing was magically fixed but also knowing that something important had shifted, because for the first time in years they were no longer pretending everything was fine. And in that honesty, fragile but real, Emily sensed that their future, whatever shape it took, would be built on truth rather than quiet distance. Morning arrived quietly, and Emily woke before Daniel, watching soft light move across the walls as if the house itself was breathing differently. And she realized she did not feel anxious like she usually did after difficult nights, but calm, because the truth had already been spoken and there was nothing left to hide. And when Daniel finally woke and looked at her, there was no rush to speak, only a shared understanding that something important had changed. And over simple breakfast they talked without blaming each other, discussing how years of routine had slowly replaced intention, how love had remained but effort had faded. And Daniel admitted that he had confused stability with success, thinking that providing comfort was enough while forgetting that emotional presence mattered just as much. And Emily explained that she never wanted excitement from outside her marriage, only to feel chosen every day, heard without asking, and valued beyond habit. And Daniel listened closely, not interrupting, not explaining, just absorbing every word. And after breakfast they took a long walk through their quiet neighborhood, speaking about small changes instead of big promises, agreeing to rebuild slowly through honest conversations, shared time, and attention to emotional needs. And Emily noticed how Daniel reached for her hand naturally, not out of fear but care, and as the day passed she reflected on Lucas's role in the night before. Understanding that he was never meant to replace anyone, but to reveal what had been missing, a reminder that connection begins with listening, and later that afternoon Daniel suggested counseling, not as a last hope but as a shared commitment, which surprised Emily and made her feel respected, and as evening came she received a message from Lucas wishing her well and thanking her for the honesty of the night, and Emily replied kindly, feeling closure rather than confusion, because her path was clear now. And when Daniel lit a single candle on the leftover cake and asked her to make a final birthday wish, Emily closed her eyes and wished not for perfection or escape, but for courage to keep choosing honesty even when it felt uncomfortable, and as she blew out the candle, she felt a quiet confidence settle in her chest, realizing that this birthday had not given her answers wrapped in celebration, but something far more lasting, the ability to speak her truth and be heard. And as night fell and the house grew still, Emily rested her head on Daniel's shoulder, aware that their future would require effort and patience, but also knowing that love, when faced honestly, can grow stronger rather than fade, and in that calm moment she understood that the unexpected gift of her birthday was not a person or a surprise, but clarity, and with it, the strength to move forward with open eyes and a